This is ContraZoom.
where we go back and forth about film.
I'm Dakota Arsenault.
And I'm Rachel Ho. On this week's episode, we're going to be going into our fourth installment of the A24 Retrospective. If you want to go back and listen to our old ones, we've done three others. We've done The Glimpse Inside the Mind of Charles Swan III, that's episode 156, Ginger and Rosa, 158, and we jumped ahead in the queue and did The Green Knight, 159, which Dakota really liked, but I was on the fence about. This week, we're going to be looking into Spring Breakers. Now, Spring Breakers is actually a pretty important film in the A24 history. The quality of the movie, however, has been debated. If you go onto Letterboxd, there's hilarious reviews, which I quite enjoyed, ranging from it's super feminist to it's a piece of crap. So today, Dakota and I will be discussing, is it a great work of, feminist perspective, or is it a piece of crap? How you doing, Dakota?
I'm doing great. That first off, excellent job plugging the previous episodes. Love that.
Yeah, I did a little research. I went back because I went, Dakota does this. I'm totally going to do it too.
Well, much appreciated. And that's a great introduction. Some of the Letterboxd reviews are quite hilarious. This is the type of movie that I feel leads itself to meme reviews, and I can definitely see how you really enjoyed yourself reading all those reviews.
It was hilarious. Like some of them are very like, this belongs in an art gallery. This is as important as the suffragette movement kind of thing. And then you've got others which are just, I wish I could give it less than half a star, which I find those kinds of movies very interesting, but it's also, I think, very A24, or what we would now consider A24. Like, I think that's why this movie is quite important in their history, is that it's kind of exactly what we think an A24 movie is, in that it's very divisive, just as The Green Knight was. It's not their most recent now, because Lamb came out, which neither of us have seen just yet. But anyways, before we dive into any discussion, let's go over a few of the details of the film. So first off, it had a limited release in New York and LA on the 15th of March, 2013. And then it had a wider release in the States on 22nd March, 2013. The director is Harmony Korine, who is also the husband of one of the actresses, Rachel Korine. And along with Rachel, there's Selena Gomez, Vanessa Hudgens, Ashley Benson, and James Franco, whose inclusion in the movie is interesting as the years have gone by. But it's also worth mentioning those four. At least I think the three were like former Disney star, children, teen stars, which I think is pretty important into the film. If you haven't seen Spring Breakers, it's about four college girls. Their names are Britt, Candy, Cotty, and Faith. And they are incredibly desperate to go on spring break, but they don't have enough money. So, as any poor college student would do, you decide you're going to hold up a chicken shop with some water guns. That's what I did when I wanted to go on spring break in my university days. And then while they're on spring break, they go partying and, do all the things that a Florida spring break would afford you, or as you can imagine. And they get arrested while they're there. I believe it was on narcotics charges, and they can't afford the fee, or the fine rather, to get out of jail and to kind of go home. So a local drug dealer whose name is Alien, who's played by James Franco. And rapper. Apologies. Yes. A great rapper. And he's got cornrows and a grill. The whole thing. He decides to bail them out of jail. And then, in turn, he basically enters them into this world of drugs, violence, crime. As the days go on, a few of them drop off. But that's, I don't know how much spoiler we want to get into this. It is a pretty old movie at this point, though. It's almost 10 years old. But we have Vanessa Hudgens and Ashley Benson's characters. They're the ones who kind of stick it through into the end. In terms of how A24 got this movie, they actually weren't the only distributor on this one. They had a relationship with a company called Annapurna Pictures, who purchased the distribution rights in September 2012. And now before this one, they were doing the festival circuit, so they did a 3-minute preview at Cannes. They were at Venice, they were at TIFF. They ended up going to South by Southwest in 2013, just before the actual theatrical release. It was a really big hit at film festivals. Like I heard at TIFF, it won quite a few awards or at least the main award. At South by Southwest, there were queues out the door for this one. Like it was a lot of hype leading into Spring Breakers. And I think partly it was because specifically Selena Gomez and Vanessa Hudgens being former teen stars, or Disney stars specifically, it was very like, oh, they're playing like they're going to be in bikinis and it's going to be spring break. That's kind of interesting. But as I said, this was really important for A24's trajectory in film because it ended up being, I would say, the first real A24 movie. Like the first two that we discussed, Glimpse Inside Charles Swan, In the Mind of Charles Swan, and Ginger and Rosa, were kind of, bit middling and like they're just kind of finding their own identity. But this was the third one. Pretty soon after that, it got acquired, and yeah, I would say it's pretty important for them. What do you think about that, Dakota?
Yeah, I think that's a really great point because now when you think of A24 films, you think of a few different things. One, you think of it's probably got a bit of a smaller budget compared to most releases. It usually skews more to the drama side of things. You maybe sometimes with a bit of a genre bent to it, something more thrillerish, horrorish, something that is just not your average cinema. Obviously, a little bit more adult geared, and I think most importantly, it's going to be a bit of a weirder film. And I think you're absolutely hitting the nail on the head with this as sort of setting the tone of what A24 was going to be, because it really checks off all of those boxes. You have Harmony Korine, who is a director who is very well known for putting out some very out there films, and this was kind of like his big breakthrough. He had done stuff like Gummo and Trash Humpers, and he wrote the 90s film Kid. So he definitely has a reputation for being really out there and avant-garde, almost John Waters-esque. And I think him making basically what amounts to his mainstream film is still pretty out there compared to most directors, even at their weirdest. So I think this was like a great kicking off point for A24, like you said. And you look at the movies that come after this, and they really sort of seem to follow this trend where Charles Swan and Ginger and Rosa, I almost think it was just more so like, hey, these movies were available and we're trying to get to buy some films. Let's just get these ones. Whereas this sort of seems like the type of movie that they wanted to get.
Absolutely. And there was an interview that Harmony did with Rolling Stone, and he talked about how he wanted to make a radical movie. I'm paraphrasing here, but he wanted to make a radical movie with a commercial release. And I think in saying that, it's that kind of, when I read that, I thought that's pretty much what A24 is. Like, it's taking radical, seemingly indie art house movie. Like, I mean, The Green Knight's a really good example of that. Almost 10 years later, it's a movie that it's pretty out there, and it's I hate saying the word art house because I feel like it just makes it sound a little bit pretentious, but then you give it a release similar to any other movie that we would have in theater, not like just in art house cinemas, like not just in indie cinemas in big cities, like it was playing in Canada, is like playing at the local Cineplex and that kind of thing. So what did you think of the movie in general? Let's start there. Just like, did you like it? Your review on Letterboxd was kind of like middle but positive, I would say. I think you gave it 3.5. Was it 3.5 stars?
Yeah. So this was the second time I'd seen it. I watched it a couple years ago when I was just trying to get caught up on some movies that I hadn't seen before that I had missed. And this was being one of them. It was probably in preparation to watch Harmony Korine's follow-up movie, The Beach Bum, which came out a couple of years ago, starring Matthew McConaughey. And I remember watching it and being a little confused because this movie really doesn't have a ton of plot to it. Like, I know you sort of described the plot, but it really is so much more about a feeling. It's the movie just sort of feeling its way through. And yeah, there's different plot beats of, they rob the local restaurant on the college town. They pay their way to go down to Florida for spring break. They get in trouble. Like there actually is plot points, but it doesn't actually feel very plot heavy. So when you're watching it, it's sort of easy to kind of let the movie sort of just glaze over you because not much is really happening. There isn't a ton of dialogue. You're getting like almost Terrence Malick-esque shots where it's just sort of the camera wandering around in and out of the conversation, not really paying attention too much. There's flash forwards, flashbacks, overlays, all this sort of really different artsy stuff. And so if you're not paying really close attention, I can very easily see how this movie just sort of passes you by, and at the end of it being like, yeah, like, I don't know, it was sort of fun to look at. The music was really intense and interesting. You know, they got Skrillex to do a bunch of the music, and you know, you got these 4 attractive young girls all in bathing suits the whole movie, and then James Franco being a complete weirdo, all that sort of stuff. So it's sort of interesting. The first time I watched it, I think I was it's so tough to remember my exact feelings, but I think I was mildly positive on it, but also had reservations about it. And when I rewatched it in preparation for this, I feel like the movie was a lot more simplified for me. I understood it basically, I think probably because I knew what was coming. It was easier to pay attention a bit more and just sort of get lost in the mood a little bit, which is very often, you know, a lot of times people talk about movies without a ton of plot or confusing plot. Sometimes it's a lot easier to watch them a second time or multiple viewings because you're not so caught up in being like, all right, wait, what exactly is happening now? What's the relationship? Where are we? All this sort of stuff that the details get you bogged down, and you could just sort of enjoy the aesthetic of it. And this is definitely a movie where just sort of enjoy the aesthetic of it, and you'll probably have a better experience with it.
I was trying to find, there's an article, one of the articles I read last night about A24. It's like what you said there about the movie being a feeling versus like a beginning, middle, and end kind of thing. There was an actor, I want to say it was Jonah Hill, but I could be wrong, but it was like an A24 actor who said like, what makes an A24 movie, which is something that you and I have discussed before. And he said, it's a feeling. Like an A24 movie is a feeling. It's not necessarily, and I go back to The Green Knight, which is actually a really good example. It's a feeling. Like you just come away from it and you feel a certain way about it. And the aesthetic of Spring Breakers definitely is that. Like it's, a lot of people were using the term like, it's like a kind of a fever dream. And I would really agree with that. Like it does have that feeling of, it's like grays and blues in the back, but then these like really bright neon accents, whether it's, you know, the bikinis that the girls wear, literally the entire movie, by the way. They like, there's very few moments of them wearing anything but bikinis. And it's just, yeah, I mean, in terms of my thoughts on it, my expectations going into it were that I was going to hate it. And that's probably not fair. It's not a good attitude going into a movie. But it just was never a film that really caught my eye or made me be like, oh, I want to watch that. Like I'd heard about it in terms of it being an A24 film. My takeaway from it in the end is just kind of, it's almost very indifferent. Like I don't hate it. I can't say I hate it. I can't say absolutely I don't like it though. I did make a comment to you, Dakota, yesterday that I said, I thought I felt like a little dumber after watching it because it doesn't really do anything. It doesn't like, you're right in the sense there's no plot. There's no real plot anyways. Like there's no turn in the movie. There's nothing kind of big that happens. But at the same time, the feeling I get at the end of it is probably a feeling similar to if you did go on a spring break like that, where you just kind of feel a bit numb. You feel a bit like whatever, like you're a little tired and you're just like, okay, yeah, that happened. Like it was good and whatnot. And so, yeah, that was kind of for me. I think the idea of the movie is interesting in that the cast is interesting. Like, I think that Harmony Korine, he knew what he was doing by casting, you know, the Selena Gomez and
girls,
Vanessa Hudgens. Yeah, like he knew what he was doing by putting those guys into that movie, because especially I would say somebody like Selena Gomez, who has a very, I mean, it's in the film too. She's like, has a very kind of angelic, very virginal way about her. And so seeing her like hit a bong in a film, like at that time too, in 2012, it would have been very like, holy crap, like she's getting high. Like Selena Gomez doesn't do those kinds of things. And so I think in that sense, that's kind of what he was almost pushing on, because if you put any other actresses in it, does it really have the same effect? Because then you just kind of have a bunch of girls going out and having a spring break. Do you know what I mean? Like, I feel like it was a bit of a push. And I did read an article where Rachel Korine, Korine, she had to talk to the other actresses and basically be like, no, guys, like, trust him. He knows what he's doing. Like, have faith in him. And it's not going to be kind of smut. It's not going to be gratuitous and all that kind of stuff. Which leads me to think, like, she knew that it does look kind of weird. Like, Harmony is a bit older. Like, I think he's, let's call it like 15 some odd years older than those girls. And the way that he shoots it is very, I think you could make an argument it's gratuitous, but you could also make an argument that that's just kind of what spring break is. I mean, I've never been to a Florida spring break, so I don't know, to be completely honest. But yeah, I can see that being the reality of it. But I think that kind of leads on to the biggest point of discussion about this film is it like a feminist work, or does it like objectify women? Do you have any like feelings on that one way or another?
That it's an interesting question, and one I don't know if I'm fully equipped to answer, being a guy.
That's not true. I think you can. I think you can have an opinion on it. Like,
well, thank you. I think this is interesting because movies like this, where they almost exist to be provocative for the sake of being provocative, which I'm not saying that to be derogatory or anything like that. I think we definitely need art to provoke people, to get a reaction out of them, to start a discussion. And I think this is the type of movie that is trying to do that. They want you to feel something very intense. They want you to be like, why are these young girls who are supposed to be good role models being in movies, you know, scantily clad and doing drugs and having sex and all that sort of stuff. And they want you to be angry or frustrated or whatever it is. And then on the flip side, a lot of it is about sort of, at least, you know, I would say all four of the girls have a certain amount of agency where they are choosing what their destiny is. They are not put upon. They are not like, I'll give a bit of spoilers here, but really this whole episode should be spoilers if you have not seen the movie. But you know, Selena Gomez, her character Faith, which, you know, her name is not a coincidence that her name is Faith. We see her early on in church groups and things like that. But after they get out of jail, bailed out by Franco, right away she senses that, like, this guy is not a good guy. He's a dangerous person. He can't be trusted. And it seems like she isn't the type of person, other than at these parties, doesn't seem to be, you know, drinking a lot, or isn't doing a ton of drugs, all that sort of stuff. She decides right away that she's like, no, this isn't for me. I'm going home. And, you know, Alien, James Franco's character, tries to convince her to stay. And at the end of it, she's like, no, I'm going home. And so she does. No one stops her. The girls say goodbye. They put her on a bus. She goes away, and then they all stay. And then later on, when Rachel Korine's character gets shot, she kind of gets out of this trance of, you know, the haze of how much fun it's been, and is like, you know what? This isn't right for me either. And she leaves as well. And then you have the last two, Ashley Benson character and Vanessa Hudgens character, and they make a decision to stay and to go through with a hit on a rival drug dealer of Alien who had shot Rachel Korine's character. So all of these women are making choices. No one is stopping them. No one is impeding them. No one is forcing them to do anything. They are all doing things at their own free will, to the point where, huge spoiler here, when they go to do the hit on the rival drug dealer, right away Alien gets shot and dies. They continue and go on with it and do the entire hit themselves, which they, at that point, as soon as he got shot, they could have jumped back into the boat that they came in on and sped away and run back to wherever their college town is, and that was the end of their story, sort of thing. But they don't. They decide to continue. They decide to do that. And I think, you know, this is, you know, me reading and understanding feminism on an academic level. It's the idea, the concept of women having their own choice and agency to make whatever choices, good or bad, whatever you see fit, on their own, without being forced to or having it put upon them in any sort of way. The fact that these young girls are all able to make their own choices however they see fit sort of does make it a bit of a feminist film, I guess, question mark. I don't know. I sort of feel like I'm rambling a little bit here, so I'm going to shut up and let you answer the question now.
I mean, first of all, I don't think me being a woman makes me more qualified to answer a question about this, in my humble opinion. Just as I think if you ask me a question about like men's issues, I feel like you offer a different perspective, but everyone's opinion is valid, Dakota, is what I'm trying to tell you.
Okay.
And isn't that feminism? That's just, it's we're all living in harmony here, and it's fine.
And that's the thing. We're all living in harmony's world.
Yeah. I didn't even mean to do that. Okay, in terms of the feminist thing, I mean, I think, the first thing I think that stands out in the film is really how the women are dressed and the women are filmed. I think that's kind of a first issue to address, is that, like, I kind of was a little bit flippant about it, but they really are wearing bikinis, like string bikinis, basically the entire time that they're there. You know, they just kind of, and it's really gross. They sit on a bathroom floor, and like it's disgusting. It's not a COVID thing. This is my own point of don't sit on bathroom floors. That's gross. But you know, they're walking around in I think they're supposed to be in St. Pete's in Florida, and every woman is dressed in a bikini or not in a bikini. Like they're either naked or, you know, whatever. And you know, there's a lot of, you know, casual sex. There's a lot of drug taking and drinking and whatever. And I think that the purpose, like the intention behind showing women like that, was kind of shock value. It was this idea of, you know, why are you looking at it and judging them? Because if this were a film with like a bunch of dudes and the guys were going off and having a bunch of casual sex and doing a bunch of drugs and doing that, like, you know, we wouldn't really pay much mind to it. We would just be like, oh yeah, that's, you know, boys being boys on spring break. And I think that that's kind of what Harmony was trying to like provoke, that concept of, why are you okay with it when it's men, but when it's a bunch of girls, like, why can't they also go out and just have fun? Like, yes, the girls are topless and having alcohol poured on them, and things like that, but they seem to be having a good time. Like, they seem to be having fun, and who are we to judge that? And I know the time that like you and I grew up, that was looked at, like the words like slut and whore and that kind of a thing, those were like thrown around pretty freely about girls who acted a certain way. And I think right now, this generation of young people in high school, university, I don't think that they feel the same way, but I do think the kind of undercurrent issues of men can act a certain way, but women can't, without being judged, is still there. And for me, I kind of fall on, but like I'm very fence sitting on this one, because on one hand, I personally wouldn't dress like that or do things like that, but that's just me. And I know that there's plenty of women out there who would, and take a lot of strength from doing that. Like, there is something to be said about having ownership and agency, as you said, over your decisions. And if you want to be somebody who goes out and has fun, and you know, your version of fun is to go around and, you know, have a bunch of sex and do a bunch of drugs and drink a ton. If that's your idea of fun, then why can't it be? Like, obviously you take on all of the consequences and effects that could possibly have. I take a bit of, and this is, I think, a very 2021 lens on it, though. I do find it creepy that the director is Harmony Korine. Like, that kind of makes me be a bit, when he's shooting it, the film is very much so shot in the guise of like what a 14-year-old boy would want to see. Like, it's a lot,
it very much has a male gaze to it. Yes.
Yeah. And again, maybe it's maybe that's the intention, is that's how we're supposed to shoot it. But, it just makes it feel kind of creepy, and it makes it feel like you're taking, yes, these girls have ownership over their decisions, but the way that you're showing it is in a very male way. And Also, I watched an interview with the director of Zola, Janixa Bravo, and she was saying how she was choosing purposely like a type of a lens that she was choosing because she knew that the women were going to be naked a lot. Like there was going to be a lot of flesh shown. So she wanted to
Hmm.
choose a lens and lighting and filming it in a way that was very complimentary towards a woman. That it was going to
Hmm.
be very like very beautiful versus sexy. But in the fact that it's beautiful, it is sexy in that way, but not sexy in the way that maybe men would think of it. And speaking of Zola, it's like it's an interesting thing that this film, it's pure female nudity, and I don't think we see any male nudity in this one. I could be wrong, but like and like again,
No,
Zola,
yeah,
there's a montage of male nudity
yeah.
in Zola. So I think Spring Breakers is an interesting film in the sense of it's definitely a timestamp on this kind of movie, of what was deemed quote unquote okay at the time. And again, maybe it's having that male gaze. Maybe that's what makes it more interesting to talk about. And if a female had done it, and I never want to get into that that trap of saying only a woman can direct this kind of movie, because I don't think that that's true either. I think you should be able to direct. Yeah, just a man can direct this, but a woman can too. But it will be very, very different. Like they will come out as two very, very different films. Um, and it's a choice. Like it's a choice that you make. So I don't know. I don't think like I don't think I have really one way or the other. I don't think it's a work of feminist, like a feminist masterpiece at all. But at the same time, I can see where some people might think that there's a lot of feminist kind of issues being brought up in that film.
Yeah.
So
No, I think that's completely fair, and it's the type of movie where, like I was saying, where I feel like this is a movie that was made entirely to provoke people. And is that a sentiment that you sort of agree with?
yeah, absolutely.
Hmm. So it's a type of movie where they just want a reaction from you, good or bad, and they're kind of hoping that it's a bad reaction, and maybe the people that have a good reaction, or maybe the people that shouldn't be having a good reaction to it. Sort of like when people look up to the Joker or Tyler Durden or stuff like that, where it's like, okay, but why do you look up to these people? That's kind of not really the point, and you're missing it altogether. And if you're looking up to Alien or whoever else in this film, why are you doing that? What's the impetus to feel that way? Where are you coming from? And maybe you're sort of missing the point of who these people are, that they're not supposed to be good people.
Would you apply that to the four female characters? I mean, they are, with the exception of Selena Gomez's character. We'll take her out of it. But would you kind of apply the same thing where you look at those girls and say, like, should young girls be looking up to that and thinking, yeah, I want to go on spring break and do shit like that too? Oh,
Yeah,
sorry.
I think I would absolutely kind of categorize it in the same way, where it's obviously not just a male thing where there are
Mm-hmm.
bad role models to have. There are also bad female role models to have. And like, if you want to, have fun and party and do drugs, like, I don't care. It's the point when you start, robbing people and crashing weddings and throwing people through wedding cakes and murdering people. Then suddenly it's like, all right, these aren't people that you should be looking up to. This is no longer girls just, under the stress and rigors of school, just wanting to let loose and have some parties and do what they can't really do on their own campus because they'll be judged or shamed or whatever. And and then as soon as it sort of crosses that line, it no longer becomes, this is how you should spend your vacations, to these women should all be in jail.
Yeah, actually, they really
And
should
not
be.
just for having cocaine at a party.
Yeah. That I found that to be kind of interesting, in that the reason that they got arrested was not had nothing to do with the robbery that they did. Like when I saw, so
Hmm.
I did watch a trailer ahead of time, which I very rarely do, but I watched it before, maybe last week or something like that. But when I saw them getting arrested, I really thought it had to do with them getting the sticking up the chicken shop. Like that's what I thought it was for. And then it kind
Yeah.
of turns out, oh no, it was for drugs. And I was like, oh, that's different. Because also then too, wouldn't everybody in that party have gotten arrested for drugs, so why were those 4 girls tried like separately? Do you know what I mean? Like I'm thinking about this probably way too much in that sense. I think those details are probably not what the intention was to be focused on. But on the point of you saying like these movies are meant to provoke, to you, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Like, should a good movie just exist solely to provoke you, or should a movie have something to say?
That's a great question, and I don't think I quite know. Like, I would put this in the category of movies that just exist to provoke you on a scale of slightly better than other movies that just exist to provoke you. Like, I'll think of something like The Human Centipede or something like that, where they just want a visceral, disgusting reaction from you, where that's not something I'm into or interested at all. But on the flip side, as someone who is interested in art and, went to school for that sort of subject, I think as long as art is being made between consenting adults, whatever the subject matter may be, whatever medium it may take, I do not believe that, like, whenever, this is a question I was going to ask you in a little bit. This idea of this shouldn't be made, or why was this allowed? I don't believe in that. Like, any type of art, as long as someone has some reason to do it, I have zero reason behind it being made and money being given for it and people giving money to view it, consume it, whatever the medium may be. And sort of my question to you is, do you believe that this is a quote unquote dangerous movie? And do you believe that there is such a thing as dangerous movies?
I definitely don't think this is a dangerous movie. I don't think that it's not as dangerous. Like, it's the same as I don't know if you ever grew up like watching those infomercials, like Girls Gone Wild. You remember those? Like, I think those commercials you'd see. Yeah. I was a big infomercial watcher as a young person. And to me, it's no different. Like, if you were going to allow that to be an ad, then I'm pretty confident it's okay to make it a movie. And I think I'm with you on, I don't think there is such thing as a dangerous movie, or that, and maybe I'm conflating the two, but this idea that a movie shouldn't be made. I don't believe in that either. I think that when you start saying things shouldn't be made, or, that's censorship basically, isn't it? Like, it's just censorship. And that's never encouraging in the art community or the greater society at large, because we need people to kind of push the boundary. But one thing I'll say is, there's, a movie that just recently came out in theaters, is Titan.
Mm-hmm.
And that, and, Julie, I can't pronounce her last name, Ducournau, I think is Ducournau. Her previous film Raw, and then you look at like the Cronenberg kind of things. Those are films that I think are meant to provoke. Those are like, they have scenes in them that are meant to give you like you're supposed to wince as an audience. You're supposed to want to cover your eyes and maybe cover your ears a little bit. But they still say something at the end of the day. Like, they exist not only to provoke you, but they also exist to make a commentary on something maybe a little bit larger and be fairly clear about it, in the sense. And I'm not trying to say Spring Breakers is bad, because it's not as ambiguous or disambiguous. It's not as in your face and spoon feeding, because I don't think anybody who watches, those movies or Cronenberg's movies would ever say that they are spoon feeding you. But I think there's an intelligent way to make provocative film. And I don't necessarily think Spring Breakers is an intelligent way to make provocative film. It just feels like provocation for provocation's sake. And I do have a bit of a problem with that.
That's fair.
Yeah, I just think it's kind of cheap. Like, I think it's a little, I mean, and I would say the same for certain movies that are like violent for the sake of violence, just being, and I love violent movies, but like, there are some that you watch it and go, this is the whole point of it, it's just being violent for violence sake. Like, there's no other reason for it. That's interesting,
it's
though.
Interesting, sort of kind of going off of that, because so often violent movies for the sake of violence get a pass, whereas movies that are sexualized or have sexual content for the sake of having sexual content don't get the same pass, which I think more has to do with North America, specifically America's puritanical takes on sex more than anything.
Absolutely. I think that that's like a big, I say American, but I think Canada, obviously, I agree. I think it's more North America at large, but like if you've ever seen movies on cable television, I don't know what the rules are now, but I always remembered watching, say, Die Hard on TV, like on City TV when you're a kid, and they would bleep out violence, but yet in another scene you can see, John McClane. I was like, what's his name? John McClane. You can see John McClane just shooting up a bunch of people. Do you know what I mean? Like, and that's okay, but saying motherfucker, that's a bit, no, we can't have that.
Or showing a butt.
Yeah, and like there was the movie The Rock, Nicolas Cage, The Rock. Like there's one very, 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 very brief and not at all gratuitous sex scene. I wouldn't even call it a sex scene, but apparently like that caused a bit of a stir because they were like, well, how can we show this on TV? So like some TV cuts cut that out. But yet you can put like that green jelly thing and shove it into a guy's mouth and have his head basically disintegrate from acid. And that's okay. Like it's very odd the way that I completely agree with you. It's a North American thing that we look at violence and sexual content in very, very different ways. And I mean, you could point that back to a feminist view as well and saying, well, violence tends to be a more masculine thing. Sexualization tends to be a more female thing. So is it we're kind of cupboarding, female sexualization versus men just blowing shit up and, beating the crap out of each other, ripping each other's heads off. That's okay to watch. So and it's kind of weird how we grow up and like neither of us are parents, but you would have grown up watching with your parent being like, when any kind of like sex scene would come up, your parents would probably be like, okay, close your eyes. Or like, don't look at this.
Yeah.
But when it was something, incredibly violent, there's nothing, like they don't say anything. Right. And that's a very interesting kind of split. And I mean, Spring Breakers has some violence to it, but it's not very violent though. I wouldn't say, for as much as it's supposed to be like set on crime and violence. Like there's people who get shot, but it's not like gross violence, is it?
No, not in the way that like so many other movies, action movies specifically, are. The
other point that I thought was interesting about the movie, and I go back to the casting quite a bit, is using Britney Spears music, because this was 2012, yes. So this was around the time that Britney was really in the not midst as popular. Of her, but she was also like in the midst of her meltdown at that time. Like 2007 was a real crashing point for her, and then she kind of had a bit of a comeback, but was still a bit on edge. And it's interesting to look at a decade later where we are now with Britney, where people look at it and be like, wow, we were really wrong about the way that we treated Britney Spears back then, like as a media and as a society and whatnot. But it's like, it was very, to me, a very, purposeful choice to use Britney's music throughout. Like, I think it's twice that they sing her songs, right? Like in the movie.
Yeah.
And I find that, like, again, it's Harmony Korine trying to just provoke for provocation's sake. It's just being like, hey, like, if you didn't get the fact that Selena Gomez, Vanessa Hudgens, Ashley Benson were former teenage stars, like, we're going to throw you another teenage star who you will know of, Britney Spears. Was that something that you kind of clocked and thought, oh, that's interesting?
I didn't make a connection like that. I think it was more so like 2012, just Britney Spears just wasn't as popular then. She kind of had her peak, and then everyone was making fun of her, as we now realize what a terrible, terrible thing it was to do as a society as a whole. And she's now sort of receiving a bit of a redemption story now that we're learning more about her struggles. But at the time, just like, it wasn't cool to like Britney Spears or things like that. And the fact that you have, twice in this movie, like you said, early on when they're hanging outside a restaurant, whatever, and I forget what song that they're singing of hers.
Oh my god! I think it's "Hit Me, Baby, One More Time." I think it's Hit Me
You're
Baby.
right. It is Hit Me Baby One More Time. And then later when they are at Alien's house and he sits at a piano and they ask him to play something sweet and tender. And he's like, oh, you want to see my emotional side, don't you? And I go, yeah. So he starts playing Every Time, which is like a very ballady song.
Mm-hmm.
And then he's just singing it. And then the girls join in with him. And then they start showing a montage of all the robberies that they're doing. It's such a surreal moment where it really sort of sticks out. And I remember a big part of the discourse about it was like, right in this middle of this really weird, provocative movie, they sing a Britney Spears ballad. And that was just sort of like a big thing. And I wish I thought about this for our upcoming bit of Would You Rather or pairing it with something where I was like, are there any other movies with as weird of a detour of a musical moment? And I couldn't find something that I really liked, but this has to be up there, like maybe top 5, top 10 weirdest musical moments in a non-musical movie.
See, I actually think it makes sense. Like, it's kind of weird, but it makes sense to me. Like, and maybe this is in retrospect, like maybe in 2012 it's not as obvious, but it's like the girls are singing Hit Me Baby One More Time right at the beginning. Like, I don't think have they gotten to spring break yet? I think they have, right?
Like I think they had. I think it's like right at the beginning, yeah.
So, and that's literally Britney's big song right at the beginning of her career, which is full of, kind of really oddly now teenage sexualization. Looking back, it's kind of weird. Like, she was like, what, 16 at the time, I think, when that song came out, 15, 16 years old. And there's so much promise and there's so much optimism. And that's what, in the terms of Britney Spears' career, that's what that song meant. Every Time was after her and Justin Timberlake broke up, and there was like a big, it was kind of the beginning of her meltdown. If I like, the timeline might be a bit messy, but I'm pretty confident I know for sure it was after her and Timberlake broke up, and then that kind of led her into this kind of few years of absolute chaos where, I mean, mentally, I think it's clear she wasn't very well at the time. So using that song to me did make sense because these girls are about to go on something big and not necessarily good, like something kind of negative, which is where the montage of the robberies and that stuff kind of comes in. Like, so to me, it actually makes sense that I think it's weird in that it's James Franco singing Every Time on a beach in Florida on a random piano that's just by the beach, by the way. It is kind of odd, but like, to me, taking a step back, and like I said right at the beginning of this, is the retrospect, I think, kind of helps. We've had so many years now between now and what was going on with Britney's career, that it does, to me, there's a good parallel there, and I could see what he was trying to do, Harmony Korine was trying to do by picking those two songs specifically.
Yeah, that's actually a really great reading of that, and I appreciate you pointing that out because it's not something I had thought about. So that's excellent.
This is what happens when you're young and you like Britney Spears. She was cool.
I guess that's true.
Had no problems with her.
So I'm sort of curious. When you had watched the trailer before the film, you had sort of were messaging me describing it as just angsty white girls. Do you sort of still feel that the movie was that?
Yes, I do. This is like suburban white girls go wild. Like, that's basically what this is. And I know that there's the element of crime, which I don't think a lot of suburban white girls get into. Although I think the next movie up is Bling Ring, isn't it? Which that kind of shows that that's more suburban white girls being slightly angsty. I do think there is that. I mean, I know that I believe it's supposed to be Vanessa Hudgens' character is supposed to be like on kind of the other side of the tracks, as it were. So there is this element of that, but for me, I kind of read it as these are just these middle-class white girls who, just want to party and have some fun. And, a big thing for why did Faith, Selena Gomez's character, want to even go on this trip was she was saying, well, I grew up in this like small town and I feel like there should be more to the world. And for her, that more meant spring break in St. Petersburg, Florida. So I don't know. For me, I still stand by that. It does seem like a movie that is just about angsty suburban white chicks and all the fun they get caught up into. Yeah, I don't like, and that's another thing that I didn't really want to get into is like the race thing too, because it is just pure white people in this, you know. And again, we live in a different time, but it is. I wonder if that was also purposeful of showing like it's just a bunch of kind of middle class white kids just letting loose in over spring break. But I personally I don't know if there's really much to it, but it is something that you kind of notice with a bit of time and a bit of like retrospect.
Yeah, that's very true. I wonder if they were to make it today, if the cast would be a little bit more diverse than just 4 white girls, or I guess 3 white girls and a Latino girl.
Oh yeah, Selena Gomez is technically. I mean, if Vanessa Hudgens technically is not. I say technically, she's not white either. Actually, is she? And she's like half. She's half Filipino. I know that as much.
Oh, okay. All
yeah,
right.
I know. I know that she's
maybe.
Yeah, but I feel like though it works better making it these kind of white. Let's call them white passing girls, because it just I don't know how many. I don't know how many Asian kids were allowed to go on spring break like that. Let's be completely honest. I speak of that from experience. Like, I mean, there was no way that I would be able to just like, oh, bye. And then I call home later. Sorry, Mom, haven't called you in a while. That would not have happened. I mean, tell you that much.
Hey there. If you're listening to this podcast ad, first off, you've got great taste in podcasts. Kudos to you. But secondly, you probably like movies, watching them, thinking about them, analyzing them, and reviewing them. And while the tales we see on the big screen do merit discussion, I think that's only half the story. Why do we see so many sequels instead of original films? What determines which films get sequels in the first place? Is it more the directors making a big hullabaloo about seeing their films in theaters than on streaming? And beyond the obvious social good, why is making more diverse films important? The answer to all these questions and more can be found on my podcast, The Box Office Watch, where we keep watch on how much money movies are making and why. My name's Paulo, and I'm your host. For better or worse, Hollywood is the business, and which films are profitable and which aren't determines what kind of films get greenlit and which ones don't. Each week, I go over the box office charts to understand which films are on that path to profitability and which ones aren't, as well as to understand any major headlines in the movie industry that might affect those bottom lines. I help you understand industry terms like exhibitor splits, multipliers, and per theater averages. And honestly, the story of how a film grew wings and flew at the box office or fumbled around and flopped can sometimes be more engrossing than the actual story on screen, in my opinion. Box Office Watch can be found on all major podcast stores, including iTunes, Spotify, and Google Play. Make sure you subscribe, and I hope to catch you there. And remember, our watch goes on.
Anyway, shall we get into the double feature and the Would You Rather?
Yes, absolutely.
So what did you choose for the double feature of Spring Breakers, rather?
All right, well, I couldn't choose between a few movies, and then 2 of which were actually A24 films, which made them ineligible, so that kind of helped me a little bit. I thought the next film in our series, as you mentioned already, The Bling Ring, would have made a good fit, as would have Robert Pattinson's movie Good Time. In the end,
interesting. Okay.
You like that?
Interesting. Yeah. And Bling Ring is very obvious, I would say. I wouldn't have thought of Good Time stuff. That's interesting. Okay.
Mm-hmm. In the end, I did narrow it down to 2 picks, but I'm going to go with Taxi Driver, the 1976 Martin Scorsese film starring Robert De Niro. I chose this film because both movies sort of have an air of dangerousness to them and rely more on gut feelings and themes than actual plot. While Taxi Driver doesn't have the sort of candy-coated neon fever dream look, it does owe a lot of how people feel about it to the lighting design.
Yeah.
Both films also feature some narration where they're telling lies to their family members. In Spring Breakers, it is Selena Gomez, I think, calling her grandma to tell her how magical St. Petersburg is. And in Taxi Driver, Travis writes letters to his parents stating that he has a secret government job and a great girlfriend when he has neither. So that's my pick. So I'm curious. I don't know if you've seen Taxi Driver or not, but how you sort of feel about that pairing.
It's been a very long time since I've seen Taxi Driver. I watched it actually, like we talk about maybe movies that are not age appropriate. I watched that. I think I was like a kid when I saw that movie, just because my uncle wanted to watch it. It's very inappropriate, but like again, it's just kind of violence. It wasn't. There's not much sex in that movie, is there? No, I don't think so.
No, but there's a child prostitute.
I mean, child prostitutes here or there. When you're a kid, it's no big deal. It's fine. That's interesting. That's a really, really I like the connection there of it being like the feeling. Because I think that, I mean, kind of going full circle to how we started this episode about, and this being a very significant waypoint for A24 as being a movie that went into, it's a feeling. Like it's not necessarily about plot, it's about feeling. And I would agree, Taxi Driver definitely is, you come away from it feeling a certain way rather than, oh, X, Y, and Z happened. Like, you know, you went from point A to point B. What was your other one, though?
It would have been The Neon Demon, the Nicholas Winding Refn.
Oh, with my favorite, Keanu Reeves. Good time. That's a really good one. That's a really good. That's more.
That
I think
one would have been more for the neon.
Yeah. I was gonna say that's a bit more on the nose aesthetically. Like that's one that maybe a bit more obvious. That's interesting. My pick is. And I told Dakota I watched this actually literally right after I watched Spring Breakers because I haven't seen it in a very long time, is Wild Things from 1998.
Oh.
Did you watch that? You've never seen it. Okay.
No.
Do you know what it's about?
I know the cover and I know the scene.
Yeah. There's a few. There's a couple big scenes that were really big at the time. Do you know what it's about?
No, I know like nothing about this movie.
So it is, Wikipedia will describe it as like a neo-noir crime thriller, and I think that makes it sound super sexy and super like interesting. And so it's about a guidance counselor in a high school, Matt Dillon. I love Matt Dillon, by the way. He's an incredibly underrated actor. I'm just gonna throw it out there. Who is accused of raping one of his students, played by Denise Richards, and then a second student, played by Neve Campbell, also accuses him of that. Now, can I spoil it, or did you want to watch it?
No, go ahead, spoil it.
Okay, so, I mean, this is a very old movie, so it's fine. So what ends up happening is, it turns out the three of them have been working together in order to get a settlement from Denise Richards' family, which are like a super, super wealthy family in the Blue Bay area of Florida. Connections to Spring Breakers. And there's a lot of that. Like, there's a lot of lies and reveals and twists and turns in it, in that who's actually the one behind this big, let's call it a heist, like getting all this money from this family. And it turns out like I'm not going to spoil it, actually. I'm not going to spoil the whole thing. It's just a lot of twists and turns from Wild Things. So that's kind of the crime thriller aspect to it. What Wild Things is most known for, though, is a threesome scene between Neve Campbell, Denise Richards, and Matt Dillon, and also a lesbian love scene between Denise Richards and Neve Campbell. The reason I'm choosing it is I feel like, just as Spring Breakers is a good timestamp of how female sexuality and sex in general is being viewed in 2012, I think Wild Things is actually a very good similar timestamp for the 90s. Like, when the rape charges come, there's the police and the other, women and stuff like that kind of don't believe Denise Richards at first, and they're painting them as being the not the victim. Like, Matt Dillon's character is more the victim in it. Like, he keeps his job in the school. Like, the principal is very sympathetic to him and that kind of thing, which obviously today you wouldn't have that kind of discourse. And I mean, it ends up being all of them are wrong, because they were all just trying to get money from Denise Richards' family. But I think it's interesting in that sense of just like two different eras, two different viewpoints of it. You also have Neve Campbell, who at the time was a star in Party of Five. And this was a big, big, big departure for her, in terms of, she played like the punk goth kind of girl, the girl on the other side of the tracks, basically. In Florida terms, that means she lives in the swamp. That gets brought up. That gets brought up quite a bit. She's from the swamp. And, she was kind of breaking out of the goody two shoes image that she had built for herself in Party 5, but also in Scream. Like, she played Sydney, which was kind of the good girl. So this was a very big, big departure for her. And I think very purposely, like, she chose it for that. She chose it to push her acting career a bit further than just being the good girl. And I would say that would be the exact same thing for Selena Gomez. Vanessa Hudgens, maybe. I'm actually not too familiar with Vanessa Hudgens, if I'm completely honest, but I know that she started off doing Disney stuff. So that's why I chose it. I just think that there's like an interesting parallel between the two, and just in two very different eras of the time. And also, James Franco and Matt Dillon kind of look alike. I didn't really think about that, but they have a bit of similarity in the way that they appear. However, I would say Matt Dillon is much more handsome because James Franco is not. But yeah, that's my pick. Wild Things from 1998, a movie that I think, again, a lot of people I think thought it was very smutty at the time, and probably still think it's a bit smutty. But there was also something behind it in terms of a plot, like that quote unquote neo-noir crime thriller.
Smutty. I love it. You sound like a grandmother, a church grandma. What is a smut?
Those young people with their crazy music and their smutty videos.
The rock and roll.
Basically. But yeah, it's an old movie now, I guess, but it's always one that I remember. Actually, we were talking about it before. I remember it because I think I rented it from Jumbo, not knowing what it was, and it was because Neve Campbell was in it and I liked her. And then when we watched it, and then I think the threesome scene comes on, and then my dad and my mom were like, "No, you guys got to go to bed now." And like they sent me and my brother out. So I never actually got to watch it when I wanted to. And then when I was probably in university, I think I tracked it down. And then that's the first time that I actually saw the whole thing. And there is a bit of male nudity in Wild Things, courtesy of Kevin Bacon. Very fleeting.
Of course, Kevin Bacon loves to show dong.
Well, the funniest thing about that was his contract for that movie said no nudity. He had a no nudity clause in it. And so the scene where he shows the dong, as you so eloquently put it, he's in a shower and he comes out and Matt Dillon's supposed to like throw him a towel. From what I gather is the way that he was supposed to throw him the towel, it's meant to like cover him up. But there was one take that it didn't cover him up. And the director wanted to use that take. And Kevin Bacon agreed to it. He said, it's fine. He said, well, I think his thing was like, how do I look? And the guy was like, yeah, you look good. And he was like, all right, use it then. If I look good, it's fine.
You look big.
Yeah, it's fine. It's impressive. You look impressive, Mr. Bacon. And then he was saying that during the press junket, when they did the European press junket, literally nobody brought it up. But then when he did the American press junket, that was all anybody ever wanted to ask him about, which he thought was really funny. And he was saying that he was like an advocate of more male frontal nudity. He was like, we don't have that enough, which I agree with. I think like, not that I want to see more dongs on the screen, but it's more of just, if we're going to show a bunch of boobs and that kind of thing, like let's show a bunch of penises. Why not?
Yeah.
Like,
why not?
Yeah.
I'm all for it as well.
Why not? Like I feel like we're a bit too like stuck up sometimes in North America when it comes to sex, and I feel like we should go more the European route, despite me saying the word smutty a few times. So moving on, what would you rather?
All right. So, would you rather spring break, or reading week as it is often called in Canada, is usually the best time for students to get away from the rigors of university and college and have a bit of fun before you sort of hunker down for the rest of the semester. Since we are both in Canada, I want to give you two options that if you were still in school, where would you rather go? Assuming all expenses are paid, would you rather go to Montreal, where you stay in a swanky hotel, hit up the great nightlife, and finish the night with some delicious poutine or smoked meat? Or would you rather go to Banff and stay in a cozy chalet with a roaring fireplace, hitting the slopes, and enjoying winter activities while dining at steakhouses? Both are cold Canadian options, as that's all we have in February and March, but both are still great getaways. What do you choose?
I would go Banff. I'm a Banff girl.
I knew you would.
Yeah, I'm Banff. I'm not. I mean, I had my moments in university, I think as most people did when they went to like university or college. It's like you have your time of going out and being young and having fun. But in general, I've always been a bit of a stick in the mud. So if you tell me either be in a nightclub or be in, I don't know what, like, I guess like a chalet, like after you go snowboarding or whatever, I would take that. And I also like snowboarding. So that would have been I feel like, yeah, and it's pretty. Banff is pretty. Not that Montreal's not. I like Montreal too, but I'd go Banff. What about you?
I probably would go Montreal.
Yeah.
I used to snowboard as a kid, and then I got hurt, and it kind of freaked me out. And so I haven't been snowboarding since I was very young. Although now I'm out by the mountains, I want to try it again.
Yes.
But I've had a lot of fun in Montreal. I've known a bunch of people that lived out there, so it was always easy to like find a couch to crash on when I was out there. And
but you said
a bunch of times.
You said lavish hotel though. It wouldn't be couch surfing.
Yes.
You would have like a nice hotel in Montreal.
Oh, I know. This is me just saying that like my experiences so far with Montreal. So I probably would go there, and I know you're not as much of a drinker as I guess am outing myself to being. But there is nothing better than a good drunk poutine.
You could get like wasted at, like, I mean, a lot of people who go skiing and snowboarding afterwards, like you just spend the night being drunk basically.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like,
yeah. And I do love a good fine red wine, so I would definitely enjoy that or some other hot alcoholic beverages.
That's so like, you're like, yeah, I would get like really drunk. I do enjoy a really nice fine red wine though. Like, it's so classy. You're such a classy drinker.
I a little bit sometimes. I can be a bit of a wine snob.
That's very funny. I personally don't like the taste of wine, so there you go.
All right. So you got to hit me up with your question.
Okay. So just as I think I asked you and Ginger and Rosa a question from like a female perspective, I'm going to do the same thing here because it's spring breakers and that's kind of the point. Would you rather, if you were in their shoes and you went to spring break in Florida and you were maybe not committing crimes or whatnot, but like you basically were spending a week in St. Petersburg or Daytona, whatever, would you rather have to wear a bikini the entire time or have to wear high heels the entire time? So in high heels, you can dress however you want to dress, shorts, t-shirts, whatever, but you have to wear the heels. Or if you wear a bikini all the time, you can wear runners, flip-flops, whatever.
Bikini.
Really?
And the reason being is one of the music festivals that I've been to a few times is one called Bonnaroo. It's in Tennessee, and it takes place in June, and it's about 35 degrees starting at 7 a.m., and it stays that hot till about 10 p.m., where it dips down to about like 30 degrees. And when you're in that sort of weather and in that atmosphere, no one cares what you look like. It's all about being comfortable, and comfortable is wearing as little as possible. So as a guy, I only wear shorts, no shirt. All the girls usually have like either bathing suit tops or sports bras or things like that, and clothes that would resemble the type of clothes worn in spring breakers. But the flip side is you need to have comfortable shoes because you're on your feet all day. And people that don't wear comfortable shoes end up getting really sore feet, blisters, things like that, or you can cut yourself. And so if I can choose whatever comfortable runners I want to be in while also being in a bikini, I'm going that route in that heat, where I'm also by like the beach and the water, and I'm probably getting wet and need something that's going to dry. Because have you ever been in like jeans and you get caught in the rain
or the worst.
Whatever, and it's
the worst.
The absolute worst.
It's the worst.
Yeah,
denim and rain or any like water, it doesn't work. Yeah.
And I like wearing denim shorts. I'm a jorts guy. Same thing. You don't want to get those wet because then you're just kind of miserable in wet shorts all day. So I'm definitely going, if I'm in St. Petersburg where it's probably going to be north of 30 degrees, probably close to 40 degrees on some days, I'm going to be comfortable.
I thought you were going to say it's because you look great in a bikini. Like that's what you're like.
That too.
You're beach body ready. 365 days in the year, beach body ready.
Yes.
Dakota our snow. The Dakota our snow story.
Please do not look me up.
This is great.
You?
I would agree with you. I would go bikini, just and not simply because I didn't put that much thought into it, and more so of I hate wearing high heels. It's the most uncomfortable thing in the entire world. Like, have you ever worn heels? Like, have you ever put a pair of heels on?
No, but I can imagine, and I've definitely heard more than enough women around me extol pain.
The absolute worst. Like, it's so uncomfortable. I don't know. I see some girls. There's one friend of mine who sometimes I'll meet up with her for lunch, and she just wears high heels. And I don't know why she does that, because I'm wearing running shoes. So it's not like we're going anywhere fancy, but she just likes wearing them because she's a bit shorter. I'm pretty short, but she's shorter than me even. But it is so uncomfortable. I just don't know how women in general wear high heels, because there are other options out there now. And I feel like we should embrace those, because high heels are worst. Bikini would be shitty as well, just because it would be kind of uncomfortable, like being on show. But I feel like, I guess similar to what you were saying about like the Bonnaroo experiences, after a while, you just don't care anymore, and you just kind of get used to wearing a bikini. And if it is that hot out, probably not that bad. I mean, I would rather
it's easier to jump into the water.
Yeah, I suppose. I would rather not have to do either, to be honest. But in that situation, yeah, I would go bikini over high heels any day, because high heels they're like devil footwear. Yes, Dakota.
Rachel, would it not be more feminist to say that women that want to wear heels all the time are in their absolute right to do so?
Yeah, and I'm in my right to look at them and think that they are batshit crazy for wanting to wear high heels all the time. All right. Listen.
Does your friend listen to this show?
I don't know. Actually, I should maybe see. I should ask her if she ever has. But
should you call her out by name?
I have commented to her many times, like, why are you wearing high heels? Like, we're at milestones. Like, you don't need to wear high heels. Like, it's ridiculous. It's just, if we're going somewhere fancy, I understand. Yeah, but
yeah,
like, I literally met up with her once to go to Yorkdale to eat at the food court, and she wore high heels. So
wow,
it's like, sometimes you see women wearing high heels on a plane, and if you're going for a business meeting, I kind of get it. But at the same time, I go, you got a bag. You could just throw your heels in there and wear some comfy shoes on the way over. But I've seen people who just are like clearly about to go on a beach vacation, and they're wearing heels on the plane, which I just find, why? Because your feet will puff up on the plane too. So when you try to put them back on, it's not going to be very comfortable. I'm a very comfort over style kind of person.
Well, I guess there you have it.
What a great place to end this. What a great way to end this episode.
Yes. But, I think that was a really great discussion of this movie. I think we touched on a lot of very interesting themes. And much like the actual movie, our conversation didn't really have a point. It was really about how we felt.
Does it ever have a point, though? Let's be completely honest here.
I don't know.
Like, let's be honest now. Do we ever really have a point? Or are we just expressing how we feel about something?
Yes. All right. Well, I think that should wrap up this week's episode. Rachel, what have you been working on, and where can people find you?
You can find me, as always, rachelkh.com, and on Twitter and Instagram, _rachelkh. The thing I think I next got up will be a review for The Last Duel, which is actually, that's like kind of got like a feminist bent to it as well. There you go. It's Matt Damon, Ben Affleck, Adam Driver, Jodie Comer. Very good movie, actually. I quite enjoyed it. But yeah, that should be coming out on Exclaim, I think, Monday or Tuesday.
Great. Okay. If it's out, I will make sure to link to that into the show notes. You can follow the show on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at ContraZoomPod. And if you've seen Spring Breakers, let us know your thoughts on it. Send an email to ContraZoomPod@gmail.com. Thank you to Eric and Kevin Smale for the theme music, and to Stephanie Pryor for the logo design. If you like to listen to podcasts on YouTube, we do post all episodes there too. Thanks for checking us out.
So used to you saying something. Do you just want to do it again?
Sure.